Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler, for testifying.
Palmer.
You claimed in your opening statement that this was the most open and transparent rulemaking in FCC history. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You've claimed in your testimony that all of your communications with the White House were properly accounted for with ex parte filings. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you put up the slide, please? We have a slide. While they're working on that slide, I have here a copy of your ex parte filing for the President's Statement on Net Neutrality. Mr. Wheeler, it's 2 paragraphs long, 3 sentences total. Are we left to believe that the entirety of the White House's involvement in this process can be captured in just 3 sentences?
I'm now being passed that.
Okay.
Thank you. This is the letter, November 10, Dear Mrs. Dorch.
Yes, that's correct.
And I believe that it has then a 2-page attachment with it that gets quite specific and says what bright line rules should be and things such as that wireless should be covered and things like that. I mean, I think that's the...
Do we have that?
They're working on getting it, but I believe the portion that deals with this topic is, as the gentleman says, 3 sentences.
3 sentences, yes.
I disagree respectfully, sir. They put in here the entire statement of the President in which he was saying, this is what I think we ought to stand for.
If the gentleman will yield, are you telling us that Jeffrey Zients came over to meet with you to suggest and just read the President's statement? I'll yield back to Mr. Palmer.
I don't think that was the question. Maybe I'm confused here.
Well, let me
Mr. Palmer.
be a little more specific. Your calendar shows in February 2014 you had 2 phone calls the same afternoon with the Counselor to the President, John Podesta, and with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Is that correct?
If the calendar says that, I don't recall talking to Mr. Podesta, but if the calendar says that.
You don't recall talking with Mr. Podesta, so could you give us an idea? Do you have any recollection of a phone call with Mr. Podesta on that day?
If the calendar says, sir, I'll stipulate to it, but, let's...
Do you recall talking to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy?
I've talked to them, yes, multiple times.
Can you give us an idea of what was discussed in either of those calls?
I don't recall the specific... What was the date that you were specifying?
February of last year, 2014.
I don't know what the specifics of that call were. I don't recall it.
But do you have a recollection of having those calls?
If my calendar says, then, I must have. I don't have a recollection of it. And the other thing is, there's a whole bunch of things that are going on that are relevant. But I don't know what we were talking about.
Well, if it shows up on your calendar, and if you are having a difficult time remembering the calls and certainly the content of those calls, should either of those calls been recorded as ex parte contacts?
I think there's 2 answers to the question. One, I don't recall the content. Secondly, as we've discussed previously, there are specific guidelines as far as ex parte is, not guidelines, rules as far as what ex parte is. And thirdly, that there is and has been since the first Bush administration a ruling that contacts with the administration and with the Congress are not ex parte.
Last question here. What other contacts do you recall that you've had with the White House staff prior to the April 2014 emails that have been publicly released?
You have my calendar and you have my emails.
Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.